Hi, everybody. It's Susan again. I'm back this time with the Capricorn full moon, pretty much almost at the time of the full moon. It's coming up soon after I post this video. I've just been a little bit hectic and also I needed a nap today. So there we are. Capricorn is very good at doing all the work and Cancer puts you to bed. So I'm embodying the Cancer and Capricorn axis very much this week. So today's moon, the full moon, is known as the Mead moon, which is a lovely expression. It's from Old English mead, meaning honey. And so it's the honeymoon. And so welcome to the honeymoon. And this is indeed because most often in the spring, in ancient medieval times, in European medieval times, people would get married in June. And that was a tradition until really recently. Many times nowadays you can get kind of married any time. Of course, you always could, but often people would look for the spring weather and the a bounty of the spring and to nourish the couple as well. And so this is where we got the word honeymoon from. And so for those of you getting married at this time, enjoy your honeymoon. And for those of you who are not, enjoy your honeymoon anyway, because it is the honeymoon. And so here we are with this lovely first degree, or actually technically just in the second degree moon in Capricorn. And it's calling us back to a time of almost 16 years ago, at the beginning of 2008, throughout 2008 and 2009, Pluto was at this degree. So I just wanted to start out by saying, have a look at the last 16 years of your life and observe where you have come from and what has changed. And notice that because Pluto today is actually in a semi-square. And perhaps I'll show that to you on the chart and we can see it more graphically there. And here we have then the moon, which is at the first degree of Capricorn and 7 arc minutes of a degree. And this is set for actually the 22nd of June, because in universal time, it will actually be happening on the 22nd of June. And for everyone in Europe and in anywhere east of Europe, in Asia, it's going to be on the 22nd. And for those in the US, Canada, South America, it's going to be on the 21st. I just happen to be in Toronto as I'm filming this, so I'm a little confused because my point of reference is actually usually Europe. So that's I'm always having to adjust these days and try and remember where exactly my body is. So today my body is in Toronto. I'm not sure where my mind is because I've got Neptune sitting on my Mercury and my Daemon, and I've got Saturn sitting on my Saturn. So it's almost a miracle that I'm actually able to speak to you at all. Especially because because it's been quite the month actually. Nonetheless, happy to be back and trying to get some regularity into my schedule. And Capricorn, of course, is very good at helping us with regularity. And so if we notice then 16 years ago, that energy of Capricorn became very, very important in our lives as a background transformation, and that, of course, collectively as well. And because we have this semi-sextile from Pluto, which was exactly 16 years ago, was at the point where this full moon is right now. I thought I would just try and call that in because we have a number of things that are really telling us something about how we're advancing through our experience collectively and, of course, through our own lives. And the semi-sextile of Pluto to the moon is a little uncomfortable. A semi-sextile is that energy of being a little too close and not being able to fully see. In traditional astrology, it wouldn't even be considered an aspect to follow, but I find it incredibly powerful as an aspect. And because the Pluto is in semi-sextile to the full moon, it actually represents a quincunx to the sun, because of course the moon, when it's full, is in an opposition between the sun and the moon. And so that quincunx, or the inconjunct to the sun, also plays into this unease or a feeling of a real need for an adjustment. And that brings us back to the Capricorn moon, which is all about taking responsibility. So where Cancer has that quality of nurturance and care, and it's more the sort of motherly archetype, or the archetype of nourishment and caregiving, The Capricorn is the archetype of the responsible one, the one that goes out and forages for food and is the breadwinner and is the structure-giving force. So when the moon goes into Capricorn, it's not entirely comfortable because the moon is all touchy-feely and Capricorn is let's get down to business. It's ruled by Saturn, and Saturn at the moment, although it's in a traditional conjunction in the, let's call it the same house conjunction, but not in a tight conjunction with Neptune. Saturn is otherwise unaspected at the time of this full moon. And so Saturn ruling that moon in Pisces is suggesting that there's a whole new way, a unique way of finding our boundaries and finding the way that we need to move through our responsibilities. And whereas Saturn is generally about getting stuff done in a pragmatic way, the moon wants to do things in a sensitive way. And so there is a bit of a conflict here, and there may be even an internal conflict in terms of how we're feeling about things, all the more so because of that inconjunct and semi-sextile from Pluto. And so while Pluto is lingering at that early degree, first, second degree of Aquarius for 2023 and 2024, we have this reminder that it actually was only 16 short years ago that we started this incredible transformation of our lives and of the world around us. And so it's a good time to recall what we have done, how we have taken responsibility for our lives, and is there something that we still need to take responsibility for? Saturn is saying at this point, it becomes a responsibility to our spiritual self. The Saturn in Pisces is about structuring our relationship to God. So one of the reasons that Saturn in Pisces is not as bad as many people actually say is because it's just had 6 years, almost 7 years of moving through its own signs before it even gets to Pisces. And so it's been hunkering down, and that filtering process between the two Saturnian signs to get to the Jupiter sign of Pisces is actually the purification process to get us to our spiritual selves. And when Saturn is there, it's about taking that seriously. Taking our spiritual awareness seriously, taking our notion of collective experience, unity, consciousness, if you like, seriously. And here we have that in a whole sign trine to the Sun and Venus and Mercury in Cancer, which itself is ruled by Jupiter, which is 12 houses from the Sun, Venus, and Cancer, and also technically a very spiritual sign. I'm not looking at the ascendant here, just look at the signs and placements of the planets, because we're not going to get into the ascendant placement, although in London, the ascendant would be in Taurus at the time of the full moon. It's not so important in terms of this general interpretation. And so here we have this offering, let's say, a spiritual offering for clarity. Saturn is asking us for clarity. Jupiter is asking us also for an emphasis on our spiritual selves, on our awareness, and perhaps how we communicate, how we choose. Gemini is a sign that requires some kind of choice and understanding of choice. And that Jupiter is still in a trine, although it's weakening. It's just about letting go of the trine to Pluto. I'm going to still call it a trine, though, because these are two slow-moving and very powerful planets. And so that Jupiter trining Pluto has been with us now for the better part of 3 weeks, where we're really looking into our, maybe just a wee bit more, almost, we could almost give it a month, where that Jupiter trine Pluto has been asking us to reestablish a new vision for ourselves, and in a way that's actually extremely constructive. It's coming from a knowing that we need to transform something. And we have this moon here in Capricorn, again, calling back these last 16 years, just at a time when we've got Neptune at the very end of the zodiac, and it's really almost at the very end of the zodiac. We've got both Saturn and Neptune preparing to retrograde very, very soon after this full moon. And by the time of the new moon, both Neptune and Saturn will be retrograde, and I'll do a video on that as well. So with the Neptune almost at the very, very end of the zodiac, essentially it's at the Aries point, which is also known as the world point of the zodiac. So we're on the precipice of a big change. And that's why I think it's really helpful to look back in time and look back at how we've grown and what has changed, and particularly what has changed in our relationship to, if we look at Cancer, to our needs and the needs of our loved ones, or the needs of our emotional security, our psychological well-being, our overall personal well-being, and how we care for our earth, how we tend to our earth as well, because Cancer also very much represents nature as well. Homeland is another issue. And then Capricorn is very much about governance and how we sort ourselves out, how we organize ourselves, what are the structures and authorities that we work with. And wherever Capricorn is in your chart has been completely dismantled over the last 16 years by Pluto. And Pluto will be coming back to the 29th degree of Capricorn in September, October, and most of November. And so it's not like we're entirely out of the woods yet, but it's pretty much done and dusted. So I think these are really interesting times to reflect on these things, because that Neptune is actually squaring in a T-square the sun and the moon in their full moon. And the square is just over 1 degree. So it's actually 1 degree and 13 arc minutes of a square, which is a really tight square. And so this is also a reference to things that we might regret. Neptune is what we might regret. It can be things that we feel disappointment in, things that we might think we should have, we would have, could have, should have. Where Capricorn would be saying, yeah, you should have, Cancer would be saying, oh, sweetheart, have a little cookie, sit down. And I know all of you Cancer and Taurus and perhaps Libra types were all going, oh, honeymoon at the beginning of the video. You would have loved all that. And Capricorn would have been like, just get on with it, for God's sake. Symbolism. Not to say that Capricorn is not a profoundly spiritual sign. Every sign can be profoundly spiritual. It's just that it's got things to do, and more pragmatic things that perhaps emotions would drag it back into, and mess up the timeline, just like my nap did today. So this square to the sun can be a sense of confusion around our direction as well, around even our identity, and around what is going on in the world around us, because often the Neptune squaring the sun can lead us to checking out in one way, shape, or form. That sometimes is really welcome, meaning the nap. Neptune can represent naps as well. Pisces in general is the house where we would go to sleep in many ways, myriad ways, whether it's putting the body to bed, or whether it's deciding to sleepwalk through drug abuse or alcohol abuse, or overconsumption of some kind. And so we can see that is at times problematic and at times necessary. And the question is when. And so that's where we come back to Capricorn, which is all about integrity. And it's really having this integrity to know what is the right time and place for anything. And so the moon is also, of course, squaring that Neptune, and the moon squaring Neptune can be a confusion around how we feel about things. And again, when we're looking to spiritualize things, sometimes we can actually bypass what is real and go right to the spiritual and say, it's all fine, it's all good in the long run, it's all fine. But there is a reality check with Capricorn. It is an earth sign. And especially as Mars is also in the earth sign of Taurus, and Uranus is in there throwing things around in Taurus, getting us to really pay attention to what is earthly and material and necessary for our well-being. We have an obligation also to become aware of what is real, what is tangible in the three-dimensional sense of reality. What are we doing about that? And so the bypassing, or the spiritual bypassing that you get by checking out of what is our real obligation to ourselves, to each other, and to life itself, is not really helpful. That's the escapist type of relationship that might be there with the moon squaring Neptune. But the moon square Neptune can also be deeply compassionate. And especially because Mercury and Venus are also in Cancer, there can be just a lot of emotions right now. And there are anyway at a full moon. But even though it's a Capricorn full moon, which is not known for its emotionality, there are a lot of reasons to feel emotional right now with all of this water in the chart. And so it's important to check in and think, how am I doing? How are my emotions right now? Am I exhausting myself by pretending everything's fine, or am I exhausting myself by actually getting too involved and too maybe overly involved in things that I cannot actually control? So this is the discernment that comes with Capricorn. And because the moon itself is up there in that the quality of integrity and looking at things square in the eyes with that Saturnian energy of needing to do something right now, we might want to take some time, especially as we've just had the solstice. And it happens that we're just at a weekend, which for many people is a time where there's a little bit more space to reflect on things, not for everyone, but for those who could. You might want to use this time between the solstice, which was the day before this Capricorn full moon, and the day of the Capricorn full moon, and then wait until the 24th. Or even the 23rd, depending on where you are, let's say the evening of the 23rd, because we enter into St. John's Day. And St. John's Day, or the Feast of St. John, is a time when that was the time when something was acted upon. And it's just like when we have a new moon, there's a kind of a 3-day wait that allows us to see the crescent moon before we really engage in things that we've intended or started at the full moon, at the new moon. And now we're hearkening back 2 weeks to the new moon that we had in Gemini, and we're trying to fulfill whatever that was. And we may have to question whether it was too much to take on, or whether we still want to achieve that goal. And Capricorn is very good at establishing goals. The moon itself is representing our emotional nature, our emotions around the obligations that we have. Capricorn moon can be easily overwhelmed in the sense that it's so focused on what needs to be done that it gets annoyed by people. And Capricorn as a sign can be quite misanthropic and just want everybody to please go away. Just so that it can do things, because that energy of doing is so strong. But it's a really good time between now and the Feast of St. John, to really question the tasks that we think we need to be doing, and try and parse out how we feel about all of that. It gives us a time in this really precious moment of the solstice to feel a little bit more and to live into our humanity, which is, I think, what Saturn in Pisces is also inviting us to do. Living into our humanity, but with boundaries, because Pisces on its own is quite boundaryless and can feel too much and can be too related, too connected to everything that is and absorbing everything that is. And Saturn says, you know what, there are limits in this human realm. There are limits. And these times where there's so much energy, especially around our thinking and feeling, that is extremely emotional, can be overwhelming and can be exhausting. So this is also, of course, a relational axis, and it, of course, describes family and in terms of mother and father. So Cancer typically representing the mother and Capricorn representing the father, but we can extend that a little bit to extend towards a social structure of responsibility and what nourishes us socially as well. So look in your own life. Is there something with regards to your own parents that is highlighted at this time? Is there something with regards to 16 years ago that is actually highlighted at this time, or that you're recognizing you're really ready now to release and move on from, and you're making your peace? And the more conscious we make these things, the better we are. And since especially the planet Mercury in Cancer is actually squaring the nodes, building up. Mercury is almost at 10 degrees. The nodes are at 12 degrees, 13 minutes of Aries and Libra. And so very, very soon after this full moon, Mercury will be in an exact square, and then followed by Venus, and then followed by the Sun. And first off, we'll have on Saturday, we'll have the moon in a square to the nodes, to its own nodes. So there's a lot of questioning that requires a change of direction, a change of pace. And the change of pace with the North Node in this situation is going towards the thing that works best for us individually in Aries. It's dynamic, it's pioneering, and it's something that we require to function at a let's say we've hit a reset button and we're looking to function at a different level now. So think about all these things if you do have the time right now. Mull them over, and it's a brilliant time to do this ceremonially. Whenever there's a solstice or an equinox, it's great to have some kind of ceremony where you might write letters or write things down and then burn them or rip them up, put them in the garden, bury them away, and allow that to be transformed. Now, this moon in the nakshatras of Indian astrology is in Mūla Nakshatra. Now, I sometimes refer to the nakshatras. I've been a bit lazy about that lately. But Mūla Nakshatra is actually a deeply transformational place. And in the Indian astrology, it's also considered to be Vishnu Nabhi, which is actually the center of the universe, or the center of the galaxy, I should say, not the universe. And in Western astrology, that's known as the Galactic Centre. The Indians don't look at it entirely the same way as in Western astrology, but it is considered to be a magnetic energetic point. And so Mūla Nakshatra is about foundations and creating something established and very strong. Mūl means root. The Mūla Bandha in yoga is where, and happy Yoga Day, International Day of Yoga, is today on the 21st, and for those of you who practice. And the Mūla Bandha is the lock at the root of the body. And whenever I start a session with clients, we sit and we focus on the base of the body. We establish our roots, we establish our connection to our feet and to the base of the body and sense the support below. It's an important aspect of all of our endeavors because we need to come back to what nourishes us, Cancer, and feel the way that we're supported, Capricorn, and be in that reality of this physical embodiment. Especially so as we've got this Neptune squaring the full moon, which can take us away, can take us into dramatic emotional states or over imaginative states. The moon, of course, represents the mind, as well as the body and memory and the store of memory. So question all of these things that might be taking you out of your body and see to what extent you can come back into the body with this moon in the Mūla Nakshatra. Now, Mūla Nakshatra is one of the strong nakshatras. It's very revered because it's the energy of transformation. And so it would be in sidereal Sagittarius. So by the way, there's no Vedic house system. There is a sidereal house system or a tropical house system. So I'm showing you the tropical house system, which you can always see here, for example. And then otherwise we have a sidereal system, which is based on the constellations. And so sidereally, the moon would be in Sagittarius, but here we find it in tropical Capricorn. Nonetheless, it's still around the center of the galaxy, the Milky Way. And so if you have a clear sky at this moment, you can look up and see if you can find the moon and locate the center of the Milky Way as well. And that might be pointing the way for you to actually find the center of the Milky Way. The other aspect of the Mūla Nakshatra is that it's deeply transformational in the sense of courage to make the changes that are necessary. So think about that in terms of these last 16 years, in terms of Pluto and the transformation that comes from deep courage and the courage to recognize what really needs to be faced in terms of truth and the Capricorn energy of integrity and truth. And we can see how these things can deeply empower us instead of weaken us or make us fear change. Change is always happening in every moment and every breath. Every new breath is a moment of change. And the more that you can stay close to that and recognize that it's always happening, you can reduce the impact of the overall sense of change, because then we're actually bringing it right down to the granular level and recognizing that change is necessary for us to thrive and to move forward. So not only does Mūla Nakshatra have the capacity to change oneself, but it also has courage to change the lives of others. So if you have a placement that is near this point, around the degrees of this full moon, that's part of your destiny as well. It's a real change in your life and as an agent of change in the life of others as well. So resilience, emotional resilience, taking responsibility and making changes that are necessary and good for the greater good and for our individual good is all very symbolic here. And speaking of symbolism, when I was on the retreat in Ireland, Julia, who was on the retreat, and I were talking about a fellow called Elias Lonsdale. And she reminded me about him because I'd forgotten about him for a few years. I used to use his version of the Sabian symbols, which he channeled himself, and he and his wife, his now deceased wife, are extraordinary channelers, very spiritual, very hippy-dippy and very special people. Elias, as far as I know, is still in California, and probably you can find him, Elias Lonsdale, somewhere online. And I just want to read to you the passage that I have, and I'm just going to switch over here. Hang on, I'm going to switch over now to the passage that I have of his book, which is the version that I have is called Star Sparks. I took this version by a fellow who was translating that about 15 years ago when Pluto first entered into Capricorn. And I started to translate it myself, or rather not translate, but edit, because it was an unedited version. And the fellow was wanting to edit, but didn't have the time. And so he was just selling the copies that he had as a PDF in order to share the information, but he hadn't had time to fully edit yet. So these are my version of the edited readings, but you will probably find a better version because, as Julia was mentioning during the retreat, somebody else published the book, went through, because it's channeled, it's a little bit random. Some of the expressions are a bit random. And so the channeling might be a little tricky. For some. I want you to think of this as a meditation. And this is what I used to do with my clients 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when I first started. I would print out, those were the days when we would sit together with printouts, and I was sitting on the floor and looking at the charts. And I would print out the passages that were relevant to their chart, and ask them to reflect on them as meditations, not as advice, not as something that is coming from a place of trying to intellectually understand, but a place that you're listening to something that speaks to you perhaps in the heart, in the center of the heart. So let me read you the first degree of Capricorn. Now, normally with Sabian symbols, we read the second degree, and I'm going to read the two together because we're only at 1 degree, 7 minutes of Capricorn. And so the first degree still has a really strong influence here. And I'll read it and you can see it on your screen. And the first degree of Capricorn, according to Elias Lonsdale, or Elias, I'm not sure how you say that name, is a canopy bed with curtains. And again, this is my edited version, so probably not as up to date. This book is about 15, 16 years old, the version that I have. And I think there is a new version out. So mine is called Star Sparks. It might have a different name right now. Probably it does. This protection around me insulates me from the stark, direct impact of that vast world out there. I depend upon these perspective graces to be a sheath around me so that I can step forth into the world from within my own true being and not their external factors ganging up on me and taking me away from what I know and who I am. I am blessed and privileged to hold to these timeless structures and to be given the timing, grace, to enter upon each and every cycle from deep within the intact, old-fashioned way. I'm well aware that few others are granted this boon, and now it says boon, but it should be boon with an N, which means a blessing from the gods. I know the responsibilities it puts me under, and it is simply what is given to me to bear. The obvious and perpetual advantage is that I remain self-possessed, suffused with integrity, Capricorn, and constant conviction, Capricorn. I know what I'm doing and why. And this does mean a whole lot to me. The subtle and ever-intensifying disadvantage is that from this place, I do not know others' experience, and I cannot empathize with that which is the polar opposite to my own lineage and tale. That's also Capricorn. Capricorn is so focused on its mission, so focused on what it needs to do, that it finds it difficult to fully understand another person's experience or emotional nature. And please don't write in the comments that you have a Capricorn moon and you're a very empathetic person. Depends on the chart. This is the Capricorn symbolism. I am bound by my framework. There's Saturn. Indeed, it defines me and holds me back. Yet this truly is a situation where it is too late for me to do anything about it. I must embrace the way that I am, although there is one possible path I can walk if I gather the strength and believe in its power. I can develop by discipline and the kind of hard work I'm accustomed to, a place inside me that is so steady, so unthreatened, so entirely whole, that this dissolves the barrier and the boundary. That's that Saturn in Pisces that we're looking at, creating the correct boundaries, but not entirely holding on to boundaries. Then I can step forth from my stronghold, a free man or woman. Or whatever. Short of this, I will remain enclosed within my prenatal resolves to give myself a fiercely set apart inner world. I find that really very rich. The second degree of Capricorn, which is technically where this moon is at 1 degree, 7 arc minutes of a degree of Capricorn, represents a gold-plated wisdom tooth that has been removed from someone's mouth. Don't ask questions, just let it sink in. This is all channeled symbolism. The separation we intensively experience when we are yanked clear of what we have known and assumed, and we are deposited in a space infinitely familiar and resonant, absolutely strange, and away from what was previously built up and made to seem massively important. Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn, 16 years ago. Until this year. The endless, tortuous, it should be tortuous, I'm not sure, fascinating journey of being brought further and further away from cozy and easy categories and plunged into that which seems to be the last place you'd ever want to go. Speaking of Pluto, the inward necessity to face something which we never would deal with if we held our assumptions of life intact. It is only when there is a foundational breakdown, a fissure in the rock, that we suddenly are brought to a new kind of attention. Otherwise, we bask in the collective trance indefinitely. Now, this is a wonderful expression right now, given that we have the Neptune squaring the full moon here. And recognizing that a square requires adjustment, it requires action. The Neptune square is suggesting that that's a tendency. It can be something that we tend towards, but we need to do something about it. We need to question that tendency. The abrupt, staggering, agonizing too much to bear, stumbling upon another world inside the outrageous, unfair, filled with demands and dilemmas we would be better off without. Now, again, don't make this make sense on a literal sense. It's a channeled message. And this can be where Capricorn realizes it's just overwhelmed with obligation and duty, and often because it's taken it upon itself. And often guilt, a feeling of guilt and shame can be linked to Capricorn. A feeling of responsibility, but not sure why one feels responsible for everything else that's going on in the world. Question that as well. Because the little self is here, reactionary and regressive, we can draw to ourselves tough, hard, extended lessons in cutting through any variant of the attitude or stance of arbitrary power. Again, Pluto in Capricorn over the last 16 years. And if you think 2008 and 2009 in particular in your life, we need to be truth vessels, stripped austerely of any trappings leading towards taking the power upon ourselves. There is a karmic heaviness underlying this frequency. So much is being brought before us on so many levels at once. Will we surrender into what we have agreed to make our own? Will our pride yield to the so very humble nature of learning time and time again? There's that word, time, that Saturn, that we have no business turning into this world into our own old tired story. Own what is yours and let it go. Own what is yours and let it go. Those are my words, not Elias's words. But this is the meaning here for me of this Capricorn full moon. Own what is yours and let the rest go. Take responsibility where you have responsibility and recognize that there's too much for all of us to bear. We can't do it all. We can't do everything all the time. I want to point out as well that this is the last time that we have the full moon out of order. So we have a natural order with the moons that in terms of the progression of where we set an intention, it's the beginning of the lunar cycle. Of course, the moon doesn't care about this, but astrologically, in the tropical sense, we begin the new moon intentions at the new moon of a sign, and we see that realization, the culmination, which is the full moon point where we are in this moment, usually in the same sign. And for a year and a half, we haven't seen that. So since the beginning of 2023, we haven't seen that energy of this regularity in the cycles. And now because we have two full moons in Capricorn, the next one being at the very end of Capricorn, 29th degree, we are now going to go back to the new moon and full moon in the same sign. And so there's a little more coherence there where we can actually find that we have a symbolism that aligns, at least in terms of our own mental interpretation of the stars and the aspects in the sky. Of course, the stars and aspects in the sky, I could not care less about our mental interpretation of them. But it's helpful for us to plan and to recognize what we are looking forward to. So as of the 5th of July, I will be, before the 5th of July, I will be explaining a little bit of my insights into the 5th of July new moon in Cancer, at around 14 degrees of Cancer. And then on the 21st of July, when just before the sun moves into Leo, we're going to have the next full moon in Capricorn. And then we'll be able to look again at Capricorn and where Pluto is in 2024. So I invite you to think about Pluto in Capricorn as a part of this awakening, that this understanding, let's say, of the full moon in Capricorn today. And I wish you a lovely weekend. I'm reflecting on that, a lovely solstice, and thinking in terms of insights of awareness at a time that it's also a very fresh and new beginning in so many ways. So sending you lots of love, and we'll see you again earlier with the next sessions that I will be posting. I'll have more time now to do some videos for you all. Take good care. Bye.